Nature Vibration from Meditation 432, opening this episode of the RIOPY podcast. This episode, we're talking about the more meditative aspects of music and the wider meditation practice. Shortly, we'll hear from Dr. Charlie Howard, a consultant clinical psychologist and founder of the charity MAC UK and Exception, a mental health organisation that works alongside those in the media. Now, she believes mental support should be available to everyone when they want it and when they need it. We'll also hear from Dr. Jenny Murphy, who will help us understand the term introception and what it means for the body-mind connection. But first, RIOPY, what are you hoping to get out of this episode?
What I'd love, I think, for actually an episode is, when people finish that, they have first a smile on the face, and a takeaway which is, live a happier life, because that's what we all want. For me, there is always a why. Even with what I went through my entire life, I don't regret anything. Why? Because first, I'm very happy today, very positive. You learn, right? You grow. And my music, if you look at the first album, RIOPY, it's basically the result of my whole life in this album. It's very raw, it's very kind of, like emotional. It was recorded in my home, and then from that, for me, right, my own experience, it's love. And that's why, after that, we had Tray of Light, and it's our evolution. That was about, evolution, because we are evolving as a species. Not sure it's always going the right way, but we are evolving. And then Bliss. Bliss, I think, talks, by itself, and then Thrive. So it is an evolution, and again, for me, the why is love.
I'm Dr. Charlie Howard. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist.
So can you tell me, why did you start?
There's a long answer to that, but hopefully an exciting one. So I started my life working on the streets of London with highly deprived young people. Lots of them were involved in gang activity. I did that for a bunch of years. I set up a charity called MAC UK. We took mental health to the streets, and we delivered flexible mental health care on benches, buses, stairwells, wherever they would engage and have a conversation with me. And then I started running a private practice. Lo and behold, some of the young people from the charity, they called me one day and they said, Charlie, we want to run a project in South London. Can you help us raise some money? And of course, I said, yes, I would do that. And I reached out to a music manager who had volunteered. And he said to me, thing is, Charlie, I really need your help. He said, I'm working with this global pop star and I'm really worried about him. He needs help. Nobody will help because they don't know what to do, because he doesn't want their help. He doesn't recognize that he's got mental health difficulties and needs. So I said, no problem. I'm used to working with young men that don't want my help. And then one day on our way back from a gig, he said, this thing that we do in my truck, Charlie? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I quite like it. And he said, what is it you do? And I was like, well, I'm a psychologist. And he said, well, will you be my psychologist? What I realized, RIOPY, was that a lot of people in the public eye are really unhappy. From the outside, their life looks glossed and it looks rich. And actually, if you start scratching away, there's a lot of torment that sits under that. And I realized that the work I did on the streets was really similar to the work with artists.
I really like to help. I really want to help. Generally, for me, it's so important, right? Because I really believe that if everybody is happy, then, we change the world. We live in a very, very good world. And I also believe that most people who are not happy, most people who are, violent or mean or whatever, it's because they are not happy. It's because they have an issue. Usually it's a lot of trauma. I've been, of course, to therapists. And when I was young, being part of the course, they sent me to psychiatrists, therapists, psychotherapists. I did everything. And nothing really worked, right? Obviously. And then later in life, I also saw people and stuff. And I was like, wow, if you're not ready to do the work yourself, then you will not change. And if we look at anger, all of this, we can change that. We do live in a very crazy world. And yes, everybody is sick. Everybody has mental health issues. It's not even mental health issues, because we know that if we have issues in the brain or the mind,
it will go to the body at some point. And look at these artists, as you say. Now, because of social media, everybody is its own, God. And you need to be the big God. So if you have, a lot of followers, then you are a God. But then, it's not enough. So, but my friend, he's got 2 million more. What do I do? This one it's got more. It's better. Yes, as you say, it's going to be in the charts. What are the tools that you're using with Exception? How can people benefit from that?
One of the things I think we're bad at in therapy as a society is that we expect people to turn up and talk to a complete stranger when they're at their most vulnerable. And that's really hard. Help seeking is complicated at the best of times, but when you're vulnerable, it can be really tricky. Have a relationship with us and know who we are and trust us before you hit crisis. And so that for me is the most fundamental. How do you build that trust so that you can then go on to do that work? And that was true on the streets, and it's absolutely true with artists, in fact, with anybody that we work with. So you've got an artist that's really struggling with anxiety. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what it feels like before they step onto that stage to perform? So that we're all moving and pulling in the same direction.
It's very important, I believe, and you tell me, but with your experience, that you make a fully conscious choice. And from the being level, from your heart, okay, I want to change, I want to be happy, I want to heal. And I think that's what's happening with most people, even on this planet at this moment.
And it's really important that we get to that place where we can look after ourselves so that we can not only exist in the world, but thrive in it. It's really hard for some of the clients that I see because their schedules are wild. And often when I first meet them, I'll just say, just tell me about your last couple of weeks. And I'll say to them, what you are experiencing is normal, but the context that you're operating in is not normal. And it must never become normal because that's not going to be conducive to you feeling well. And actually it's your humanness that is at the essence and the magic of your creativity.
Because it's not the same state, right? It makes me sad, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to try and help, because we need to talk about the elephant in the room. The problem, I think, is, for me, I see it as almost the foundation is wrong. If the foundation is wrong, how can you build a house or a tree or whatever you want to build for yourself?
You're right. And I love your analogy of the house. We have to have a strong foundation, and that's how we can thrive. And actually that's how we can make magic happen through music.
It's really interesting because music saved me, the first time, then the second time through the meditation and the balance stuff, and now and the third time. But I do believe it's the last. And it's funny, I got very, very sick and no doctors could find what I had, no doctors. They could find an infection, but they couldn't find, what? I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, headaches all the time, pain everywhere. And I have 3 little kids and they would see me like this. And then, of course, I have the guilt. Oh, my God. And I want to do more. But every time I was trying to do more, boom, then I would collapse. I surrender and I meditate. And I'm like, I don't understand. Come on, what's happening? I'm doing everything. I didn't know what to do.
A quick taste of RIOPY's Meditation 22. Now back to the conversation with Dr. Charlie Howard.
Everyone's experience is different, and there will be similarities, of course. But as a clinician, the first thing that I really want to try and do is to really understand what my client is experiencing from their perspective. So they might say to me, oh, I'm feeling burnt out. And I might say, but what does that mean for you? Because often we use words and we presume things, but actually when we unpick them a little bit, different things mean different things for different people. So we would always start with an assessment. And the purpose of that is to have a shared understanding of what's going on for that client and to think with them about what's going to be most helpful and what do they want to get out of therapy. Because I may have an idea, but actually they might want something completely different. So an artist might come to us, for example, and a manager might say, well, they're coming because they want to feel less anxious when they're performing. And I might spend half an hour with them and they might say, what I want is to have a better relationship with my son. And so often we have different lenses that we see things through. And for me, the first bit is really understanding what's going on. So for people listening, if they're taking that first step to getting help, it's really important that they feel comfortable with the person that they're talking to and that they feel understood. And sometimes that can take a few goes. So there's no one therapist that's right for everybody. So if you go to your first therapy session and you come out and the vibe just doesn't feel quite right, that's not a reflection of you. And it's actually not a reflection of your therapist. It's just a reflection that that particular pairing isn't quite right. So try somebody else. There's no problem with that. What it comes down to is there a good connection? We can do any therapeutic method we like, but it's that connection that's important and meeting somebody where they're at.
At the end of the day, you need to meet a human with a heart that connects with yours. And you need to be in the flow state. And this flow state now is being studied more and more. I'm a part of the study also to do that because I love it. And I have a little EEG I put around my head and I can measure my brain waves and I see the state and we can see the flow state in people. And I'm with a group of friends. They've been playing some of my stuff. And what's interesting is you've got the flow state and you have another state that is just being calm. And it's funny that sometimes people think when you're calm, you're in the flow state, but you're not. And this flow state is very unique. You focus, but you're very present.
We live in a world that's so fast-paced where we have bite-sized information that we're used to digesting. And a lot of the work we do clinically is around the kind of practical side of the rewiring that you're talking about. So we do grounding techniques. I might say to someone, oh, you walked to see me today. What did you see on your way here? And there'll just be this silence. And they'll say, well, I was on my phone or I was watching this TikTok video. And I'll say to them, okay, so your homework is to walk to see me next week, but to actually see. So they come back and I'll say, so what did you see? And they'll say, well, I saw people. And I'm like, yeah, but what did you really see? And so then their homework for next week will be to come back and to tell me what they actually saw. What were the people wearing? What were they doing? What was the smell? What were the sounds? And so then they come back and they'll give me kind of more richness in what they've seen. And by the time we kind of get to week 10, they're noticing the specks on the floor. And they're like, I've seen things on my walk here that I never knew were there. And I've noticed that there's trees and they're beautiful. And I walk past them every day. This is about grounding ourselves in the present. And what we know is that we spend too much time in the past, often thinking about things that have happened to us. And we spend way too much time in the future thinking about what might happen to us. And we worry about the future. And actually, if we can ground ourselves in the present, that's when we start to become rooted in who we are. And that's how we start to, from a clinical perspective, rewire some of what we're thinking and we're seeing. And I worked with one artist, RIOPY, on mindful teeth cleaning. He said to me, Charlie, I don't have time to do this. And I said, you don't have time not to do this. And I said, tell me something you do every morning. And he said, well, I get out of bed and I wash or whatever. And I said, do you clean your teeth? And he was like, yes. So I said, so I want you to clean your teeth mindfully. He's like, what on earth do you mean? I said, I want you to feel the brush in your mouth. I want you to taste the toothpaste. I want you to feel the texture. I want you to feel what your teeth feel like as you're brushing. And I want you to feel what your teeth feel like when you finished. He did this and he said, brushing my teeth is starting to change my life. What I think he was saying was, for those 2 minutes before I go to sleep and when I wake up in the morning, I am present in what I am doing. And he started to do that in other parts of his life. So he went on to mindful tea making, where he would very mindfully make a cup of tea and feel the mug and the texture. And this is what we need to do in a world that's so fast paced. We're losing touch with our present. We're not here.
And that's why I'm making it to new mind. I make, binaural beats that I actually make myself like a soup, because you have different ingredients that you put together to really make it work. And it's about creating, because to understand, and it's also, of course, the science, how to synchronize, these two hemispheres. And we see in EEG that it does help, rewire the circuit. When we look at the data of these binaural beats, I think it's funny because it's been there for since the 70s. I think it's fascinating. I think it wasn't probably easy to talk about that still 20 years ago, but now it's becoming more and more mainstream.
So the piece playing now is the opening track to the Meditation 66 collection, part of Tune Your Mind. The track is Breathe. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Meditation 66 and Tune Your Mind?
Meditation 66 is a training program because people find it very hard to meditate. It's like 21 days because we know the neuroplasticity. If you repeat something long enough, then it starts becoming a habit, which is a good thing if it's positive. The only thing you have to do, listen to it with headphones because it's binaural beats. The sounds, basically the music does the rest. That's it. And then your brain slowly is going to go into that specific frequency. And we know that when we go into the theta waves, that's where the creativity is, and relaxation, alpha, theta. And then I made also sleep meditations. So to help people get to sleep, but a good sleep. Not just to sleep, right? Because of course you can get really drunk and then you sleep, but you want to have a good sleep, like a healing sleep. If you listen to something very positive going to sleep, it's very likely that you'll have a better sleep. If you watch a horror movie just before going to sleep, that's not going to help. Some will go through it, but I don't think that's going to help. So yeah, that's what I do with Tune Your Mind.
The thing is, fear. It's all fear. In the past and in the future. But in the present, there is no fear because you're right here, right now. So you're happy. For those listening, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Why? Because right now you're focused. I feel everything is backwards right now, in this society. But hopefully AI could do the stuff we don't want to do, because I really believe the only future we can have is creating. And when we create, we are happy. And creating anything, right? Just creating. And a lot of people think, I can't, I'm like, everybody is a creator. You just don't know it yet, but everybody is. And I love hearing that because that can give, people a lot of, ideas, because this is a meditation. It is. Even going cycling mindfully, right? Instead of being, as you say, on the phone all the time. You cannot multitask, And by the way, about your artist you work with that actually brush the teeth, is he still doing it? It's like all these spiritual gurus thinking, I'm enlightened. I'm like, first, I really don't believe that. But second, it's not because you're calm that you're enlightened, but also you have to maintain. You're never there.
It's really hard. And what often happens is people start to feel better. And so then they stop mindfully cleaning their teeth because they don't need to do it anymore. And of course, it's the very fact they were doing it that made them feel better. So maintenance is hard too. And this is like going to the gym. We wouldn't expect to keep physically fit and not go to the gym or to do some sort of exercise. But yet with our minds, we seem to think we don't need to maintain anything. And I'll often say, if you're doing your physical workout, what's your mind workout? And for some people, it might be journaling. It might be doing mindfulness. It might be grounding techniques. It might be writing things down that they're grateful for in a day. Different things work for different people, but it's important that we doesn't have to be lots of time, but we have a specific time each day where we focus on our minds.
I have a little oximeter. That's one of my tricks, right? I say to my friends, find a trick also that works for you, right? Because we're all different. For me, I like to hold my breath. I take my oximeter and I'm going to work on slowing down my breath. I go from, in general, I'm around 60 and I can go down. I went down to 45.
Wow.
But to do that, you need to be very, very present because it's an exercise and at the same time, it's a game. We learn better when we play, when it's fun, because we're made of feelings. And love is, for me, the feeling above it all. It's about love. That's why I think you need to play, because now we're becoming so serious, right? Everything is so serious. Like, why? It looks like, in a sense, for me, sometimes like Sisyphus. You know the Sisyphus myth? So you've got this stone. You take the stone up to the mountain, and then the stone goes down again. And then you do it again and again. And isn't it what everybody is doing a little bit at the moment? Do you feel it's getting worse?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer. I mean, I could probably write a whole PhD just on that question alone. But my take is that we're getting much better at recognizing mental health. We're getting much better at knowing it's there. We're starting to have a vocabulary to talk about it. I look at kids and it's much more normalized, and generations under me in the workplace expect for the most part, for things to be conducive to more of a work-life balance. I think things are starting to move, but in terms of our ability to then be able to respond to that, I think we still have a really long way to go. And the reality is that services that provide mental health support are overstretched in the third sector, the statutory sector here in the UK. Like the NHS is completely overstretched. And often, even if you've got money, you can't see somebody because that sector's overstretched too. And we're not going to therapize ourselves out of this problem. Therapy is an important part of helping people to feel better. But actually, there's some things in society that fundamentally have to change, because I think we're creating a world that isn't necessarily conducive to what we need mentally as humans to thrive. And we've spoken about some of those things. The business drives short-term attention to things. We multitask. There's expectations on us to be all things to all people. And there's almost a kind of self-imposed impossible target or task that we set ourselves to achieve. And often when people come and see me, they'll say, oh, I feel like a failure. And this will be somebody that's won Grammys, sold platinum albums, made a fortune, and they feel like a failure. And I'm like, tell me about that.
Isn't it funny? I mean, one day I was at a friend, like maybe 10 years ago. A big party on a yacht and blah, 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 and so proud. And then his friend came with a bigger yacht. He was so depressed. And I actually laughed. I laughed because I was like, oh my God, it's like, you are the top of the game, right? That's why we call it top of the game. But you're miserable. You're depressed. You're sad. Then, okay, I'm going to work more to make more money. But dude, like, how much do you need, right? How much do you need? 300 billion? That's what you need, but to do what? And then what? You're not taking it with you everywhere. It's like, look, I'm famous. I'm beautiful. I'm like, I'm a model. I'm this, I'm that. But none of them are happy. It's never ending.
When we don't have a core sense of who we are, we look for external validation to make us feel good. So we need to be famous. We need to have likes. We need to have money. But actually, those things don't make up for us not having that core self. And so people keep chasing, thinking this will make me happy, this will make me happy, this will make me happy. And it won't. And actually we get happy not by being dependent on things external to us. We get happy by having a core sense of who we are. And that is a lot of the work that I do with artists, with anybody in therapy, is just kind of exploring a little bit with people this myth that external things drive internal happiness. They don't. It's a disconnect. Money helps. We all need money. We need money to be able to live, and we need money to do things. But money cannot be the core of who we are and of our self-belief. It just can't.
Well, Charlie, it's been a pleasure. Actually, I don't want to stop. Thank you so much for all this insight and your kindness.
Thank you for having me, and good luck. I love what you're doing. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I think there are actually two brains, the gut and the second brain. So I started, experiencing a lot of things, on myself. For meditation, for example, maybe I can share that as well, the little routines, I do. The breathing, first of all. breathing, we should do it through the nose, not the mouth. And if you do this, you might already feel, if you do it in a day or two, some differences. Everything I do today is because I had to do it. It's not, that's cool. No, it was a necessity. Like playing the piano was a necessity. Going into the meditation was a necessity because it was too hard, right? When you have as much trauma as acquired, what do you do? So you need to be into that space. And that space, by the way, I've always been into that space with my piano.
From the Tune Your Mind series, that's a taste of one of RIOPY's binaural sleep meditations he discussed earlier in this episode, Deep Relaxation 528 Hz. Our second interviewee is Dr. Jenny Murphy. RIOPY started by asking her how she came to be interested in the field of interoception and how that combines mental and physical health.
I did performing arts when I was younger. I trained as sort of a dancer and a singer. And I left that when I was around 19 and ended up doing psychology when I was 22. Whilst I was there, got very interested in research, mainly perception in general. So at the time I was doing more face perception and social perception research. How do we relate to other people? But as we know from research, our kind of understanding of other people relates somewhat to our understanding of ourselves and our own emotions. And so that led me towards looking into more the processing of our own emotions, which in turn led me to this topic, which I'd never heard of before, and I don't think is a common word that people know, which is interoception, which is how we perceive our own internal bodily states, although this definition has been expanded a bit, rather than just asking people whether they think that they're able to perceive these states. Spent a lot of time working on how we may objectively measure this and also how we can do this remotely.
So I've got so many questions, but the first one, why did you get into this? Because usually when you do things, it's very hard to do something we don't like. We get attracted to things, right? And clearly, if you were like a dancer and very interested in the performing arts and stuff, then you have a creative mind. And when we're creative, often we are a little bit more in touch with our emotions. However, I can talk personally that there is a huge correlation between the mind and the body, right? If the body is not well, then the mind is not going to be well. And that's why you're here, right? Because it's Tune Your Mind. So why did you get into that?
I think most researchers, or at least people who are drawn to psychology, are interested in people. And a lot of them start off thinking that they are going to be a clinician, that they're going to work one-to-one. Now, I found that once I started getting clinical experience, that I realized that this was not something that I would realistically be able to sustain over a career. This is where I sort of turned my attention a bit more towards research. How I ended up with interoception was almost completely by accident. My PhD supervisor at the time, some people in the lab had been working quite a lot on interoception in relation to autism and another condition called alexithymia. And he sort of said, there's some interesting things to explore in this area. How about for the first year, you kind of take a risk and see if you're interested in that. And we can always go back to the other idea if not. And I read a few papers in this area and was like, wow, actually, there's so much potential here.
The more you're aware of your body, the more you can tune the mind in. And interoception, correct me if I'm wrong because you already explained it, but it is the senses of all the organs and to be aware of our own body through the senses.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's sort of the awareness of our inner bodily states. There is some controversy as to which signals are interoceptive and which are not. If we think of something like our heartbeats, these are obviously inside our body, but sometimes we'll feel our heartbeats not through an internal mechanism, but through an external mechanism, like it vibrating against our chest wall.
We can feel the heart, we can hear the heart. I travel with an oximeter. I find it interesting that, for example, this morning I was in the car with my wife and I was very calm, very great, 60 BPM, great. And then she gets on the phone and I'm still really focused on myself, I'm okay. But suddenly my heart went to like 80. And I was like, that's weird because I didn't see it coming. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe the conversation, subconsciously affected me. And it's really, I think, fascinating to see that the body responds even to subconscious.
Interesting. So first one that I think is quite interesting is this idea of sort of the mind and body, this separation. The idea that we have a kind of mind and a soul that is separate from this kind of physical body. Whether you believe in this separation or you believe that the body and the mind are sort of one and the same, there's a clear connection between the two. And I think that often when we've talked, at least historically, about mental health, and I think if we look back in psychology, sort of changes in the way that scientists have approached psychology have really influenced what we found. So there was sort of quite a lot of interest in the sort of late 1800s on emotions and mental states and such. And then around the 60s, there was this kind of resurgence of behavioralism. Like, unless we can observe it in an experiment, it doesn't exist, basically, or it's not worth studying. And that had so much influence for such a long time. And there's been such a change. I mean, generously, I'd say in the last 30 years, but certainly at least in the last 2 decades, towards a refocus on some of these things that are more challenging.
Mental health right now is, of course, why I'm doing this is because we live as a collective. I mean, we are together, whether we want it or not, right? You go outside, you're going to have people. And we need to feel good because everybody is so stressed, so tense at the moment. And with all your experience and your research and what you're doing, like, would you have like 1, 2, or maybe 3 tips for people to have a better mental health and try to have a better life?
I would say that the evidence suggests that we shouldn't be too obsessed with our bodily signals, at least from an interoceptive perspective. If it is useful and serving you well, then absolutely do what you're doing. If anything that is done to excess is typically not great for us. Too much exercise is not healthy. Being too strict with one's diet is not ideal. All of these things in moderation are usually the best way of going about things. So I would say that if you are a person and you're finding that monitoring your bodily signals is not serving you well, you're becoming obsessed about getting your step counts for the day or something like that, then it may be time to try a day without the smartwatch and see how you feel. Do you feel better or feel worse, etc.? So I think that's one takeaway that I would have from my own research. But more broadly, I think a lot of the things that support good mental health are the absolute basics, which sounds so simplistic. But they're often, I think, if you're feeling very stressed, going back to basics can help. Sleeping well, eating well, getting some sunlight, although in the UK, that's always a bit of a challenge at times, some fresh air, moving one's body. These sort of simple things can help. I guess from the broader mental health literature, not my area, but something that I think is always worth considering, is focusing on the things that are in your control. It's amazing how we realize how much is not in our control and that we sort of almost have to let go and accept. But actually, if we step back and think about what is in our control to influence and change, we will feel that we have more autonomy and power, and that can be quite helpful for one's mental health to let go of the things that we cannot actually do anything about.
I love it. Thank you so much. I mean, I do agree with you just to go to nature, walk and fresh air. And I live in Portugal, so I do take a bit more vitamin D than in London. But still, we have infrared beds in London.
I haven't tried them, actually. One thing that I did try was, have you tried this float rest therapy?
Yeah, of course. The floating tanks, yeah?
Yeah. Do you want to describe your experience of that?
Oh, I basically went literally out of my body. Yeah, it was amazing because you don't feel anything more, like your senses. I would be very careful though, because it's a lot of salt. I would, tell people if they want to do it, be careful not to get it in your eyes, because I did the first time. It was very bad. But the feeling of being pitch black and, you just close your eyes and you feel good. But I don't think it's for everyone either, right? As you say, meditation, don't learn meditation when you're very depressed, because that's going to be worse. You need to learn meditation when you're happy. And then when you're depressed, you use meditation and hopefully you get less depressed. What's your experience for the floating tank?
I tried it out at a sort of facility where they've been doing a trial. For people that aren't familiar with this, you're basically in a salt bath and floating. The temperature of the room is heated to the temperature of the water, which is the same as your body. And so you end up with this sort of bizarre experience of not knowing where your hand ends and the water begins and the air begins. It's very, very strange. I actually only tried the open tank and kept the lights on because I think I would have found it quite stressful otherwise. So I could close my eyes for a while, but actually fully immersing myself in this sensory deprivation, I don't think that I would have been able to handle straight off the bat. But it's an interesting one for how this might be influencing your bodily perception as well, because and also how it affects your sense of time. So I was in there for quite a long time, but it felt like no time had passed. So how this works for well-being and such, scientifically we don't know, but it's an interesting, novel therapeutic approach, I think, for bodily focus without kind of cognitive focus, as it were.
I guess maybe the first thing is introspection, right? To be aware of your body. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoy that. I mean, so much to learn and to discover. So it's always too short, but thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was lovely to chat to you. Hopefully we can have another chat in the future. Who knows?
So, RIOPY, we're nearing the end of this episode. Lots of valuable advice from our guests, but it might be nice to finish with some advice from you on meditation.
To meditate, if you close your eyes, if you ask me, oh yeah, but how do I meditate? I close my eyes and that's it. And we're like, well, you don't need to sit cross-legged. You don't need to do that. My experience is that as long as you are comfortable, because if you're comfortable, then everything is already easier, right? You need to be comfortable because you want to empty your mind. And some people think it's not possible, but it's absolutely possible. If you walk, let's say, you go to the forest, it's silent and you just hear, the birds, and it's already a kind of meditative state, right? That's what people love, going, and having walks, Now, if you want to go a bit further, yes, lying down or seated, with something on your back, it's hard otherwise. Otherwise, you have to think about, oh, my back, oh my God, am I straight? And then if you start thinking, then you're already out of the meditative state. Let's say today I had a rough day and I'm like, oh my God, I can't just, sit and close my eyes and get there. What I do, I'll do a few push-ups or a few exercises with the body, because then it calms the body down. Then after that, it's like, oh, I feel good. And then you can actually meditate. And that's where people actually, I think, should try and meditate. Why? Because as most people, oh, I do my 45 minutes, oh, I'm feeling great, then boom, I can directly, go for my day and do big things. That's where it's the best time, because you're feeling good. So take a moment. Why? Because if you take a moment now, then it will become a new habit, a new routine, and your brain and your body will start changing. Most people want to learn how to meditate when they are in a bad place. If you've never meditated in your life and you close your eyes and you're in a bad place, yes, it's going to be worse, because then you're facing all your fears. You're facing yourself, by yourself, in the dark. Of course, it's not going to be fun. That's why it's good to try and learn meditating when you're happy, in a good place, because then you will have less of the dark place when you are, in that bad place, if that makes any sense. It's like a wave, right? It goes up and down, up and down. And it's funny because I think this wave I'm talking about, up, down, you get super happy and then you get really down, right? And I used to have that. And when I was going out and drinking and stuff, oh yeah, you got a high. And then the next day, oh my God, like super depressed. And that's why I say I don't really care about the material success, because then you go really high, but then you will have to go down. So what I learned is, instead of having a very high wave, which we can see in the brain are associated with beta waves, then I go slowly. So my wave is less of a high, but it's less of a low. So it's more in the middle. And then I'm in a very happy place, very content. It really helps.
Please like and follow this podcast to make sure you never miss an episode. There's some great stuff still to come. But for now, let's close with the second release from RIOPY's upcoming album, Be Love. This is the very beautiful American Dream.